us started here. We're back again with a crowd favorite. Am I telling you the truth that John is a crowd favorite? I don't know. We don't get a ton of emails about him or anything. But people seem to really enjoy those conversations just from the people that I've talked to. So we're going to bring him back. And we're thankful that he decided to join us again. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Very much. Okay, awkward. Let's go ahead and talk about the subject of the hour. We have been hinting at it for months because we've been wanting to talk about it for months. And that is the wonderful, beautiful, lovely app. Yes. It's called TikTok. Gee, Connor, John, have you guys heard of it?
Well, technically in China, I think it's called, is it Douyin or something like that?
Yeah, it's
Douyin?
something like that.
It'd probably be Douyin. I'll find out how to pronounce it. But yeah, that's China's version.
Yeah.
Ours is TikTok.
Yeah, the non-brain rot version is Douyin, and then TikTok is about as sophisticated as the name itself. So
yeah, well, I know that you've always kind of had, you and I both share a huge hatred and dislike. I want to say Connor's on the same place with it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Connor, what are your thoughts on the TikTok, the clock app?
That it's brain rot.
Okay, so he is on the same level. He's on the same.
It's not like we've had things kind of come and go social media, and like the one that I can think of before was Vine, and you had, what was it, 6 or 7 seconds of content that you could make. 6 or 7 content, and that 7 was like maybe. And that forced creativity because there were some limits with it, and TikTok's got its own limits, but for whatever reason, what they're generating is anything but creative. No. It's cookie cutter for one. Like, you know, when you drive around, you see a neighborhood and every single house is the exact same color scheme, same shutters or lack of shutters, lack of windows. Everything's exactly the same. That's TikTok, but it's all these people that are performing not even feats. They're just copying off each other, and it takes no real talent.
Here in America.
There's no value to it. It doesn't add anything to the society. It's not an accomplishment. Like there's literally nothing to it. And if people ever thought that YouTube was full of brain dead content and they use TikTok, they're probably lying to themselves about it.
I really wish. I cannot. Okay, I found it. Okay. So something interesting about TikTok, and I'm not sure if people know this. I'm sure younger people probably know this, or people who were on TikTok early on, is that it's derived from an app that was called Musical.ly. And Musical.ly, I'm pretty sure, was pretty popular amongst like kids for the longest time. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of considered like a very, and I guess they sort of treat TikTok as a kid-oriented app as well, as we've seen over time. But it was very much not an app that was considered to be taken very seriously. And then they did this rebrand, and that was, I cannot give you an exact date. Was it in
2016 is when they launched TikTok, right?
They launched it in 2016?
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about TikTok, is that TikTok was able to like double their amount of users within a shorter time than all the other platforms. Besides,
I just saw what it was.
Yeah.
It looks like in 2018 they merged. TikTok bought, or ByteDance bought Musical.ly, and then it turned into the hellscape that we now know as TikTok. I remember seeing the branding when there was this huge push in early 2020, late 2019, I believe, to get more and more people using TikTok, like just random ads everywhere. And I was like, that's not going to catch on. That's a stupid name. It's already been done. Fine. It didn't stick around. It couldn't have survived. And I liked Vine. I enjoyed Vine for what it was before it just turned into a huge either,
Mhm.
you know. But apparently we can't have nice things, and we decided. Well, we kind of decided, and I think the whole problem with TikTok is um, it sort of gives the illusion, and you can argue this about all social media, but I think this conversation will be oriented around why TikTok is different or what makes it different. Um, there's the impression that, oh, this is what's popular. And like you mentioned, people just keep replicating the same things. These trends start on TikTok, like they start on other places on the internet. But there's this sense of virality that's just exponential on TikTok. And I think, especially because at least the original user base was a younger demographic, it's so much more. I already used the term viral, so I don't want to use it again. But invasive. It
Mhm.
has this invasive uh, element to it. And obviously, multiple other forms of content are able to be sprungboard from. You're able to springboard from TikTok into multiple
Right.
different forms of content as well, whether you're commentating on a TikTok or you're using it to advertise something else. People use TikTok for all sorts of things today. But before, it was just the dancing app. it was
Right.
it was just little kids dancing and all that.
Well, I still think it's a dancing app because that's the thing that is so. Let's kind of get into why it's such brain rot, as Connor so eloquently put it. Is that it's basically like just a ton of booty shaking. So it's booty shaking.
Mhm.
It's complaining about something. Um, it's a lot of like women like putting on their makeup as well. I feel like those are some of the categories, and there's not much, like it goes viral and there's these trends, but the trends are like full of nothing, right? Like I feel like if we had like trends that were, intellectually challenging, that would be fine. Like I'm trying to like imagine how China's TikTok is. Like they have like a math equation go viral, maybe that's the most racist thing I could say, but like that's kind of how I imagine it being.
Yeah,
But with us, it's just something that's really just stupid. Like, and then you spend a ton of time on it as well.
I just remembered something else about TikTok that if I remembered it before, I would have based the entire premise of this conversation on this. And I hate that I didn't think of it before now. But TikTok really blew up, had this huge growth in 2020.
Yeah.
2020
During
being
COVID.
COVID and the presidential election of that time.
Mhm.
Um, there was a huge push, especially due to COVID, where everybody felt like it was time to throw their hat in the ring and use their influence. All these celebrities and all these people of elite status threw their hat in the ring to support who was going to be the better candidate, as they claimed at the time, and I think that TikTok really was leveraged as a very effective apparatus at capturing a large demographic. Because I want to say the youth vote, but I've called it sort of insinuated it was a kids app multiple times. It's not a kids app by any means, or at least that's not what it is now. Um, but I think that TikTok really was used as a tool, leveraged by, and I don't want to just be like, oh, the Democrat Party did this and that. I'm not trying to just throw arbitrary ideas for the sake of it, but I think that it's not a coincidence that it blew up as fast as it did, the way that it did. Because, like you mentioned, it was around for quite a while before 2020, but there was a real progression. It's like there was this huge investment in shifting the culture at a certain
Mhm.
moment in time. And I think
Well,
there's really something to that.
well, can I ask? Let me throw this out to you guys. Do you feel like there was a change one because of COVID, so a lot of people were on social media because they have nothing else to do? And this question has two parts. That's the first question. The second question is, do you think China was so invested in getting rid of Trump that they put a lot more of their time and money into TikTok to influence Americans to put in to put in someone like Biden that would be a bit softer on them than Trump. Does that make sense?
I say question one, yes. Question two, I'll take it a step further, sort of a step further. And again, I don't want to sound like just, oh, conspiracy theory island. And again, I wish I remembered this information so I could have done more to be able to just pull off the sheet over here to talk about. But there was significant investment from the Democrat Party in social media influencers to drive the youth vote in 2020. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't even need to be China. It doesn't need to be that the CCP wanted a particular candidate, which they probably did. But that completely aside, the private sector was investing in individuals.
Like investing, this might be a dumb question, but like investing money, like, or just investing time into them to get them to make posts, you know, that type of thing.
That's what I would love to know. Because I don't know if there's been an exchange in money, and it's something that I would have spent hours looking up before this if I thought of it. But I know that people like Philip DeFranco, for instance, he is a huge news commentator on YouTube. He's sort of an OG YouTuber. He's been on there for the longest time, and I'd say he's sort of considered. I would consider him sort of mainstream news for most normie internet people, you know. But I noticed a real shift in a particular direction in 2020, and I just thought, okay, well, most people are deciding to just starting to say their opinions and such, you know. And he had prided himself for the longest time, on being nonpartisan and just sort of trying to see both sides and package things in a way that made sense. But he completely abandoned that during COVID, which I would give a pass, given that COVID was so scary and a lot of people have changed their minds. It was a time of great polarization. However, he did decide to go. It's not just that he went fully left. He had Anthony Fauci directly on to speak to his audience and tell them how they should be dealing with and again, it's not like any of us knew what was going on at the time. None of us to this day do we know what was really going on at the time, but we won't go into all that. But people, something like that, something like having a state actor such as Fauci on I wouldn't even call DeFranco a political influencer. I would say he is now, whether or not intentionally. Like I said, he was sort of just mainstream news for normies before. But he and a lot of other people, there have been whispers amongst the greater internet community that a lot of these people who had a lot of power, a lot of influence, they started getting that pressure. Oh, you have a platform, you have a responsibility to push the truth, especially with these crazy MAGA people out there who are spreading misinformation. And that he comes up, he's the number one person I think of when I think of where I first heard the complaining about the spreading of misinformation and vaccine hesitancy and people having opinions that are like trying to make certain opinions that are pretty common seem really fringe, you know? Like, oh, the anti-vaxxers, they wanted to, I'm going to get you guys demonetized. I'm not going to go in that direction. We're talking about 2020, so that's what I'm thinking of. But I feel like that it's a good example of where it started because it all sort of, since none of us knew what it was, I wouldn't have called it a partisan thing at the time. And I think a lot of these people who have fallen victim to it, whether they fell victim to it or they chose to follow an incentive, basically whether they were just following an incentive structure or they were directly incentivized, there was a very clear push in the culture for a certain narrative to win out. By the time we got to not just the election, but everything that came after, throw in January 6th in 2021, and then you have clown world we live in now.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about incentives as well, the way TikTok has structured the content that it feeds, because it's not like TikTok is completely absent of actual good content.
Yeah,
I've seen
absolutely.
videos that have it, but they don't ever have a precedence. They don't ever make the millions of views or hundreds of millions of views that these other ones get. And what it looks like the company has done for their algorithm is for the videos that are going to go viral, which that used to be a pretty rare thing back in the day, but TikToks are going viral all the time to the point that I don't even know we can call them viral anymore. But they've lowered the bar so much with what can be going viral with these TikTok trends that like
Yep.
anybody can do it, and it just gets people consuming more content and trying to copy it. Me and my wife were all the way in Japan, and if you've seen the videos of the deer that bow, I went and filmed because up on the steps in front of a building was like 2 or 3 girls all doing a really stupid TikTok dance, tripod out and everything, and it was just like,
They had a
can't escape it.
tripod?
Even here, yeah, they had a tripod with a phone set up to film them dancing on the steps, and I mean, it wasn't. And and the thing is, like, Japan's culture is very much they photograph like everything, but TikTok videos is not something that I really saw that often, and usually it was foreigners out there. But it's like, you're here at this place, you didn't have any deer in frame, you're not interacting with them. Like, that is probably the better content and more educational. And yet we're doing like these first grader, like, made up dances, and those are what goes viral.
You've got that. And then you've also got people practically worshiping bin Laden. That was a moment.
That was a wild one. Well, bin Laden, and then also when everything that happened over in Israel and all of the from the river to the sea content, and it just swept through. And it surprised a lot of people, especially people that on media, I think, that are Jewish, like Bill Maher and a few others out there. What's that guy? Ethan Klein, I think, from the H2O podcast. Yeah. And he's very much been like not pro-Israel, even though his wife is Jewish. But then when he saw the hate come back out,
he was shocked.
Right after that, like, you would have thought Nazism was accepted. That's how I was watching some of those videos and reading the content.
Jordan, you've probably seen clips, but are you familiar with Ethan Klein, aka H3H3?
I'm not. You have to educate me.
You're not missing much. You're not missing much.
Not really.
Sort of as a callback to I think the first call like this we did. He is one of the first people, I would say, ushered in the anti-SJW movement, sort of just making fun of the original snowflakes on the internet, you know?
Yeah.
But then around 2020, when the incentive structures changed and all that, when people were doing more moral grandstanding, you know, some people, and I believe in his case, it was he genuinely, maybe some part of himself felt like he genuinely did something wrong, or he had to change his platform. And, you know, he did that whole pivot. He ends up turning on Jordan Peterson. He had done a podcast with Jordan Peterson back in the day, and it was an interesting conversation. But then Jordan Peterson becomes he was already a controversial figure, but he became an increasingly controversial figure, and his audience, his new liberal, I say liberal, these people aren't liberals. These are communists. His new communist audience was like,
dang,
you can't be platforming people like this. So he takes down his interview with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson replies saying, hey, I liked you. I'm not going to insult you. I'm just going to say, be careful with the platform that you're building, because you're going to keep raising the bar of expectation. And then one day, the same people right now that you're trying so hard to pander to, they're going to turn around and they're going to eat you. And
it's such a Jordan Peterson thing to say.
It is. It's a very Jordan Peterson thing to say. Then, sure enough, as you know, October 7th happens. It's egregious and all that. And as Connor mentioned, his wife, she was in the IDF, because in Israel you're required to do at least 2 years. I'm pretty sure it's men and women. You're required to do
men and women both required.
And they're biologically Jewish. Well, she's biologically Jewish. I'm pretty sure he's Jewish as well.
I'll double check, but I didn't think he was, but I might be wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Either way, obviously it's part of who he is. But and I know I'm telling a whole story right now, but he started a podcast with a very popular left wing streamer named Hassan Piker, Hassan Abi.
Oh, I know Hassan.
Yeah, I'm sure
I
you know
know
Hassan.
Hassan.
Back in the day, I was like, oh, this guy may have like he's but like when I saw little clips of him. But in 2020, he started doing the super long form and just sort of taking things up level and level. And I'm like, oh gosh, this guy's crazy. Anyway, he started a show with Hassan. After October 7th happens, Hassan immediately comes out here talking about how you can guess the stance that he had, and Ethan's just here like,
I've
wait,
heard his
hold up.
stance.
Yeah. Ethan's like, hold up, like you're painting a very broad brush. Can we not speak about this with any nuance? And they ended up having these. They're crying on air and stuff. And I'm not saying that to mock him. I'm not like, oh, this guy's crying on it. And like they were having. These are probably the most real conversations that they had been forced to have. And since it was just all happening in real time and such, it was too much, and it wasn't a thing. So I'm pretty sure as of right now, their shared show is on hiatus, and he's sort of trying to avoid that discourse because his audience is not a fan of the fact he's not far enough a certain direction on that particular subject. And I know we just opened a whole other subject, but yeah, that's who Ethan Klein is.
Gotcha. And just to keep us on the right track, what does he have to do with TikTok again?
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
I'm trying to recall.
We got there because we were talking about how TikTok sensationalizes and just sweeps through these different concepts, communism being one of them. The issue with Israel and Palestine was a recent one, and we've seen a couple other waves. I mean, the vaccines, that was another one during COVID that got big during TikTok. Well, it exploded when nobody had anything better to do. And there was plenty of stuff like that.
Well, at the risk of going on another sort of tangent, I still think this is a good question to sort of posit. You mentioned before the influence that China may have wanted to have on the
virus they started.
Talk about getting us demonetized. Jeez, Connor.
Our political landscape in the year 2020 and such. And I was like, well, it doesn't even need to be China necessarily. We have forces here and such. But I think a way bigger, I think what a lot of this comes down to is the World Economic Forum. You guys familiar with the World Economic Forum?
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Unfortunately familiar.
They have been around for a very long time. And I think part of what we're seeing right now in every facet of society is really just what has until now just not been quite as much noticed. I think that they've had a lot of influence in the way that we operate our societies across the Western Hemisphere. And that includes in the digital landscape. And we're just now starting, like, COVID sort of supercharged seeing the effects of that, but they've always, for decades, had agendas in terms of the direction that they've decided that the global economy was going to go. And we've all sort of gone in that direction, not really noticing because, again, there wasn't really a reason for all this to coincide. But I think where a lot of this comes together is technology. As much as it's brought us together, another thing that COVID did was really show people how not on the same page that we are and how much that we were all missing. And since, like, when we were all sort of forced to look at the same thing, like occupy the same digital space at the same time, and we're arguing over where to get information, and we're arguing over, is this the right thing to do with our kids, or is this the right way to go as a society? We started just seeing the fingers of influence, and I think that's I'm basically saying I'm not as concerned over, oh, the CCP really wants to destroy America as much as I am. There are a lot of
A lot of
very
moving parts
yeah,
that
a
are
lot of
happening
moving
in the
parts, a very
situation.
big coordinated web of powerful individuals. And I'm not saying that in a with a conspiratorial lens. I'm saying these people went on TV last week. They may be on this week as well, talking all about this. They'll tell you all about what they want to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's pretty consistent with what we see play out virally, the sentiments that we see rewarded and we see repeated over and over and over in every algorithm, not just TikTok, you know. Yeah.
Right. Because I was going to say, even with, you kind of go back to Anthony Fauci, like he didn't just make his rounds on TikTok,
Yeah.
he made his rounds everywhere.
Everywhere.
But I think what I see is this effort to make America this superpower into a malleable agent. Because if you think about it, you create an app that brings to the top some of the most mindless people that you could imagine, right? And it's not that they're idiots, it's that we're now conditioning them to be mindless. So you have these little dances, or
classical conditioning.
Very,
it's just Pavlov's stone.
Yeah, poor philosophical views of narcissism, relativism, all this stuff. And then you tell them that now you need to platform these select people that they've already picked out. So you platform them, and then that's the message that gets spread. And then you kind of squash down, the more intellectual types, and they've been slightly successful, but people like Jordan Peterson, very difficult to quash. But there are other thinkers out there. For example, like us three, we probably don't think of ourselves on a Jordan Peterson level, nor should we. But
we're
we
not.
are still, no, we're not. But there's plenty of people like us, though, that are like looking at this going like, wait, this is wrong. Like, this isn't right. Like, you don't have to be like mega, IQ intelligent to figure some of this stuff out. But our voices are still getting quashed, and we're elevating a bunch of these people, quite frankly, that don't really know what they're talking about, but they've been so brainwashed by, I think, their own desire to be popular. And almost there's this pride that you give them for like, oh, you have to use your platform. It's like, oh, I get to use my platform. I'm so important. And, and then we know what happens from there.
They turned attention into a currency. And I'm glad that you mentioned, we're not here anywhere. We're not comparable to someone like Jordan Peterson, but that is exactly why. That is exactly what they want everyone to focus on. They always ask dissenting voices, oh, what makes you the authority on this matter? We have this whole sentiment, and actually, I want to be careful with how I address this because I first heard this coming from the other side. And I say the other side in terms of when that sentiment of we have to trust the experts emerged again in 2020. 2020 is about when we decided, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this for this unprecedented event because that's what the experts are saying. I could not understand for the life of me why we weren't listening to the experts and why some of the conservatives wanted to make it so difficult for everyone else. And it wasn't because they were conservative. I was just like, well, what problem do they have with experts? I think the conservatives, and not just conservatives, just populists, people who care about human beings, because it's not just conservatives, it's team sanity versus everyone now. Team sanity versus everyone else. They have a messaging problem. What they meant to say is they are propping up who they're saying are the experts. We're not just listening to experts. We're listening to certain experts. Other experts are being subdued. Their dissenting voices are being smacked. Like I don't have the right words right now. So.
No, I get what you're saying. I understand.
Yeah, they're censoring people left and right, and there were a lot of doctors who had a lot to say about what was going on at the time. And we had dissenting voices in media who were told, hey, not allowed to say this right now. We're at a very delicate point in our history. If you care about the future of our nation, you're going to not spread any more of this sentiment. You're not going to spread any more of this information. And they sort of did that with everything. It's sort of like in a football game when you have an interception, the person just runs as far as they can until enough people manage to run over. How many yard lines can you get across before people finally catch up? And I will say, I think that collectively, a bit of a white pill for you, I do think that people are catching on. I really do. I really do think that when you give people this information, when they know you're not just a hateful, fun-hating person who's trying to rain on their parade and because it's always, they're trying to take away our rights and all that. I think people don't realize that there is team human and there is team anti-human. And they've done a very good job branding, trying to use this catch-all, the far right, MAGA Republican type people, they want to take away your right to love who you want to love, to do what you want to do, and try and make everything about identity politics. And we see that play out in the algorithms and such. But that does not ring true. People can feel that. And when they can see that you're willing to have a real conversation with them, usually, and obviously there are people who aren't going to want to talk no matter what you say, but most of the time, people are open to hearing more information.
Mm.
That's an opinion, obviously. That's not. Mm-hmm. That's my Jordan Peterson level analysis.
I guess I would agree with you for the common person that doesn't get involved, but for the people that do get involved, it's usually harder for them to hear a different opinion, especially those who've made a career out of it, because
they're just so loud. But there aren't that many. They're not that many. I'm telling you right now. Listen to me right now. There are not that many of them. Only so many people can get famous. And if you go viral, it's only for a split second. And that's why the same people keep chasing it over and over again. There are not that many of them. There aren't. You really have to realize, anybody listening, you are the majority. And they've been saying this for years, but it's not just, the Trump people think they're the majority. No, the common man, the common woman, child, whatever, common individual who just wants to live their life, provide for their family, be with the people that they love, they are still the majority. They're just not out here doing clown dances I forgot your anecdote. You're in Japan and there's something.
The deer bowing, doing TikTok videos, and
turning everything, bringing everything to the digital landscape to try and get clout off of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've found in a very small sample set, but I've found when I'm out and about with doing my normal things or I'm talking to people for whatever reason, I always do try to bring up politics, but not in a weird conservative way.
Yeah.
I'll just make a comment, and to a certain extent, we're both kind of on the same page, moderate. I could tell someone was liberal, we ended up agreeing. The biggest agreement point was Biden's just too old. It's this is ridiculous. There are people that they might lean one way liberally, or they're moderate, or they're conservative. But I have found that when I have in-person conversations and you almost approach it in a very light manner, people kind of put their guard down a little bit, opposed to coming out I'm a conservative and I believe this. Sometimes you can just naturally get into a conversation about it, and maybe we find out that we disagree, but the conversation's been so splendid, that you don't really have to be upset about it. It's kind of just feels normal.
Yeah, and they made attention a currency. Another currency is labels. The most successful, I won't call it a psyop, but I think it's some form of a psyop that we've had, especially in the digital landscape in the past 10 years, is convincing everyone to label themselves. Especially when in the digital landscape, when you're trying to get attention, you have to build a brand. Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly telling yourself, you have to tell yourself so you can tell other people what you are and scream it at the top of your lungs and be able to defend it and all that. And this is not relegated just to those spaces, and it's not just relegated to the left. The right has had that problem for the longest time. They just preferred to party in their own pool and wouldn't interact. And then they came back and they're like, oh my gosh, what happened to everywhere else, that we weren't taking care of? It's, yeah, I think it's just a matter of that. I think that they have turned labels into a currency, and the more things that they can get people to see their differences about, there are all these trigger words. I say trigger words because even if you're not the type of person to get triggered by something, anyone now knows if you hear something that might trigger someone and you're in a crowd of people, you're like, oh no, is this going to go south? Should I find an exit strategy? Is someone about to lose their job, livelihood, their reputation? Things weren't like that even. I would venture to say 5 years ago, people didn't worry about that sort of thing like they do today.
No, yeah. I would agree. It's certainly increased over the last few years, and I think it heightened. It ramped up during 2020 when people had nothing better to do than just be online.
Yeah,
and TikTok exploded, dating sites exploded. People spent a lot more time just surfing the internet. Amazon exploded. I think they tripled their profits that year. So people just spend time shopping with money that wasn't theirs.
Shockingly well.
Watching
That's
and making
crazy.
Yeah, they did. The corporations did very well. Most of them. All the small businesses got destroyed.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that's again. I try not to say just conservatives, because I really do think it's team sanity versus everyone else. All these small businesses were completely wrecked by that period of time, because they're completely, all these people they have skin in the game in their own community. They depend on participating in the natural ecosystem that exists. And obviously no one would have known what to do about the pandemic when it came. They were completely dependent on that. And then it was just, why don't you just stop all that for the sake of everything else? It seemed reasonable on a macro scale when they're able to talk down and everybody else just has to listen. But I think people have also gotten better at talking to each other and will continue. I really hope people continue to put in the effort, because like you said, people are more receptive, like when you put in the effort to extend that what's a grapevine, something that
not be a jerk. That also helps.
Yeah
certainly. Jordan, I don't know if you wanted to discuss anymore. I don't think people quite understand the differences between TikTok and China's version, Douyin.
Right.
So I think if we can lay out some of those, it would be good. John, I don't know if you had any of that stuff up and ready. I do have one article here from BBC that discusses some of the big differences that I think would shock a lot of people.
Yeah, go ahead. I have a couple written down. You probably have the same ones.
Yeah. Okay, so BBC reports that the rules, there's rules for kids that are under 14. So for any users under 14 who've been authenticated using their real names and they'll only be able to access the platform from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So there's already an hour limit, or there's a time frame limit in place. But additionally, they can only access up to 40 minutes a day of the content. And now the content itself is extremely different. It's focused on sports, music, art, math, history, science, tutorials, things that are educational and get you learning. And I've seen this multiple times. And John, you sent me a video earlier as a precursor to this definition or to this conversation. And once again, it's like every time I see what they get, I mean, it reflects probably like 25% of my YouTube shorts. Which I know YouTube's not TikTok, but it's like that content's there and it exists on TikTok, but nobody sees the light of day. And that's not because it's not cool, and it's not, people just don't, they don't value it, but there's also something to do with the algorithm. And I know a lot of people have ventured to guess that TikTok just pumps up the numbers. They can make things go viral if they choose to, and they choose to do the really low bar stuff that requires no real talent and no real accomplishment to it, and anybody can do it. So it's really easy to become famous. And 5 years ago, when pre TikTok and especially pre internet, it was really difficult to be famous, especially on a global scale. International, local level. You could probably obtain in your town, probably for some high school sport feat. You're the top swimmer, or you're the receiver for a football. You've just been catching everything in the end zone, like that type of stuff. And then you had Hollywood and you had the sports. And ever since the internet came around, social media, people have been getting famous for all sorts of things, from good to bad. But it's really interesting. I'm curious on y'all's takes on these type of limits that have been placed by the government of China. The video that you sent made me laugh because it's like, this might be the one thing that I think China is actually doing good on. And I'm like, yeah, actually, because it's very similar to what I would probably do to my own kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can go.
You go ahead, John.
All right, rock, paper, scissors, you two. Go.
I mean, I'll go ahead and go real quick, and then John can go. I mean, it's tough because it's a communist country. The government almost acts like your overbearing parent. So I wish parents would do the types of things that the Chinese government is doing for their people, for their own children. Like that's what I'd prefer. I'd prefer for the parents to be incredibly invested in the type of content that their children are taking in and putting a time limit on it. I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing to ask for. John, what do you think?
I think that they know, and when I say they, I'll specify after. I think that they know that our culture is broken and that those systems, those tenets of our society that we used to have, the family model that we used to have, that used to be much stronger, that would have those sorts of checks and balances in place. They know that that's gone, and that if this rot is allowed to just be constantly perpetuated, it'll just go infinite. It just goes over and over and over, keeps us distracted, and it's this constant war for our attention. I'm not fully convinced that who's in charge of America has much of a problem with the fact that clearly not, otherwise it wouldn't be, but I think that there's a nefarious intention behind allowing this sort of weapon to exist. I say weapon dramatically. I say it dramatically.
Can I say something to add to that?
Yes.
Something really interesting. So I think there has been a gain in popularity about China's version of TikTok in the media. Like, I feel like I've been seeing more of that. And so it's becoming known that, like, hey, TikTok really is brain rot. Like, I'm sensing that trend coming. And so here's what I think is so interesting, though, is guess what I've seen commercials for on TV? Talking about how TikTok is educational and using certain creators in America that are educational TikTokers, which is true. Some of them exist out there, right? But they're using that to say, hey, no, these are the real types of creators that we have, not this other brain rot. And I think they're doing the TV commercials because they're trying to get to the parents to let them know, hey, let your kid keep this online. That's a huge conspiracy theory, obviously, but I think that there could be some truth to it, just knowing a little bit about how marketing works and communications work if you're trying to keep people on your app, and especially if they're younger people. I mean, I could see an angle for that, but it does feel kind of nefarious.
One, the difference between conspiracy theory and conspiracy fact, the veil is extremely thin these days, for one. But two, like, I wouldn't even call that a conspiracy theory. One, you just accounted that that's a thing that you saw. And it's based on truth, and that's another part of the problem. There's all sorts of content on TikTok. So yeah, they can frame the part of it where there are people being productive, showing like how they're using this. People build businesses, complete businesses that have nothing to do with anything cultural at all off of TikTok. It can be used for all these different things, but they're leveraging the power of its virality in order to keep attention, keep all the engagement that they have on this platform. And I don't think that the motive is monetary. I think it's because if we're constantly looking outward rather than inward, we are not doing what I guess you could argue would be spiritual work in order to harden ourselves, not harden ourselves, but to be able to be more conscientious about how we're regulating ourselves, our mind, body, and soul. And clearly China thinks that's
what do you
important.
think?
Yeah, as another note, just last week or 2 weeks ago, they actually cracked down on video game usage and banned video games being played online Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's like 1 hour a day Friday, 1 hour a day Saturday, and 1 hour a day Sunday.
See, and
but they just obliterated like a whole category of entertainment right there.
Yeah, and see, it's like obviously not to champion. Oh, we want to do that over here. It's not that we want those things over. We don't want totalitarian decisions being made on our behalf in this country. I mean, there's an argument that they're just not quite as productive as China's, which is even sadder. But I do definitely think that there is something to note about how not just China. I'm gonna do a little bit of a jump. Most other cultures, if not, I'll say most other cultures because there are other considerably secular cultures in the world. If you consider today's modern America a secular culture, many other cultures, they take not just great pride in their values and their traditions as a society, they see it as an extremely important thing to keep intact. And if you go back to, that would be too much of a jump. But I do think that part of the motive really is to break it down. One, argue for your attention, like get everybody's attention centered, not centered. I'm just spitting out word salad tonight. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. There's also, I was looking at some statistics by eMarketer that says that just Android users were talking about attention. They spend 82 minutes on TikTok per day, average time.
What do iPhone users use it for?
It does not say, but I don't even want to know how. I would imagine similar. Yeah, I'd imagine similar.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Yeah, it's this is in the United States, but that's just to add to your point there.
Yeah, I think it's this battle for our attention because actually, I've got a bit of a hot take, and it may not even be that hot of a take. I think people are starting to realize how important the digital space is. And it's going to become very important that we realize just how important that other people believe the digital space is. Why is China putting in so much effort to control it so much, besides being the Chinese Communist Party and wanting to control everything anyway? The digital space is an extension of and has very real world implications. The correlation is extremely strong. The internet used to be the Wild West. It used to sort of just be a space. And it's not that it had no correlation with the real world. There have always been the intersections. But we have seen them as these two different domains for the longest time. But if people don't pick up on where they need to regulate, people need to, and obviously it's starting to become a thing as well. People are paying more attention to knowing when it's time to stop doom scrolling, on any app. Paying attention to how much they're interfacing with technology, how much they're interfacing with negative content, because I believe it was Facebook who admitted that they realized they garner the most traffic when you're interacting with things that you disagree with vehemently. And so there's a huge incentive structure for them to keep feeding you that. People are having to unplug from not just unplug. I'm not saying everybody needs to become a hobo and go off the grid for the rest of their lives to avoid like the next crisis. I'm just saying that I think people are becoming increasingly receptive to the maintenance that needs to be done in the digital space in their own life, because it's already being done for us. China has what they're doing over there, and it's much more sophisticated than what we're doing here. But I do believe that it is deliberate, the way that the algorithm works over here, whether it's because of China or not. Honestly, I don't care who's to blame for the reason TikTok or any other social media is the way it is. And there were the arguments when there were the efforts to ban TikTok because of the privacy concerns. This could be a huge Chinese spy app, which I personally believe it is. But there was the whole debate over that. People were like, oh, well, Mark Zuckerberg has all your information, and Jack Dorsey, at the time before Elon took Twitter, Jack Dorsey has all your information. Why do you care if TikTok has your information? There's been this things have been seen as very trivial in the digital space for way too long, and clearly elites take the digital space extremely seriously, especially when it comes to your kids. And so I think that's important.
I legit just did an entire episode like bashing mom influencers and explaining why, because you're correct. Like we have to treat the digital space with a lot more care than we're used to. It used to be something where we were all exploring and, we all didn't really 100% know what we're doing. But now there's people that know what they're doing, good and bad. And if you don't protect yourself from not just negative content, but mindless content, and if you don't protect your children from being made into AI porn, which, that's going to become more advanced, which is scary as heck. You're gonna be in trouble, and there's gonna be real life consequences for turning a blind eye. But Connor, back to you. Did you find anything about the Apple users for TikTok?
Yeah, I really was.
I've been looking through a bunch of different stuff, and Statista got the closest. I was reading through the webpage to see if there was anything in there that was interesting. But I mean, the most of the statistics you're going to get is downloads per operating system, which I don't think really accounts for how many are active users. That's going to be a different story, but I can't seem to find that one.
Yeah, no worries.
I did find TikTok is obviously the most popular in the US. I did find a list of countries that blocked it, and most of them is because the government. They're mostly for government reasons. America and Canada among them, but almost all of them are citing for government devices there was privacy concerns.
And there has to be a reason for that.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason for it, and I mean, aside from the fact that it asks permissions for literally everything in your phone, even things that it has no business having access to. Is kind of where it rings odd, and people think that's a difficult thing to do. It's really not. You just go into your phone settings, find your apps, and look at permissions. There it is, and you can find what they are. You should expect.
Really scared. I say scared, but it can be overwhelming if you do an information request for you'd be surprised how much these websites share data with each other, because they make money off of selling your data to one another.
Oh yeah, all the time, especially anything that's free. TikTok's free, Facebook's free, YouTube's free. All of them are free. You're the product. They're selling information about you to the competitors. And that's why if you get around to one that says like they don't track any of your information or they don't sell it, well, you have to think how they're getting money, and usually those type of services have a subscription. But even like subscription fees, like Netflix is selling your information. They've been doing it forever, and Amazon's doing it as well. They know what you watch, what you buy, what you eat, and everything else in between. And there's something to be said for how quickly technology has advanced, and we don't really know that humans have evolved along with it to understand the ramifications of connecting everybody on a global scale. It's certainly made the depression rates go up when you can see all the tragedies instantaneously from your phone anywhere you are. Something that's interesting for me that I wanted to know was the dystopian novel. I think it's Fahrenheit 451. That one, yeah, Fahrenheit 451, by who's it by? Ray Bradbury. One of the things that kind of concerned me reading through that was this description of how their media got shorter and shorter. And like it starts off like talking about how people used to watch shows and movies and they'd spend several hours doing it or reading a paper, and it would get shorter and shorter. And it's like, okay, now we're down to 3 paragraphs. Now we just want a paragraph. Now we just want the title. Now we want the title to be as few words and letters as possible. And a lot of media in the last few years has really gone towards these type of short. And TikTok really kicked it off. Now we've got Instagram Reels, we've got YouTube Shorts, all the stuff that's coming along with these shorter and shorter medias or forms of entertainment.
How do you get that hit in the shortest period of time and then go after the next one?
Exactly. You're not watching the whole show or the movie to watch the build up to these amazing scenes. You're just going to see the amazing scenes and you move on to the next thing. Like you saw the best part, you're done. You move on to it. Yep. And we see it there. And I'm trying to think there's an entertainment channel that you'll see. I'm trying to remember what it is. It's not Onion or Scallion. I can't. Chive TV. You see in restaurants, and it's basically like compilation videos off of the internet that have gone viral. Yeah, like a lot of them, like a lot of the videos, it's usually people getting hurt. So like Fail Army, the YouTube channel and stuff like that. But it's like you see the best part of the content and it moves on to the next one, and it's just dumping into you all these like best clips from shows and movies and activities and sports. You don't witness the whole race; you just witness the guy crossing the finish line. You move on to the next event, and combined with the amount of people, there's other reasons for why people think this. There's so many kids that are like ADHD these days. But I can say that I don't think that that's helping anybody's concentration or focus to taking on some sort of long form media.
Yeah.
So my concern is that we just don't really know what doing this on large scale is messing, how it's messing with our brains.
And I guess something I should mention as well, because obviously I can rail against TikTok and multiple things like it all day long, but when it comes to what is the solution, I guess, if you can pose that there's a solution, I think everything that's happening right now is sort of a result, or maybe not even a result, but more so a prompt for us to pay more attention to self-regulating, to develop new discipline. And again, it's not like 2020 was a good time. It was not a good time, but the amount of things that people noticed, for instance, when Libs of TikTok blew up and started drawing attention to what was going on in schools, that was a massive pivotal societal moment. And sometimes it feels like we haven't made much progress since then. But if you think about the fact it wouldn't have happened if the global pandemic didn't happen, we can't look at these things as a gift horse in the mouth when obviously crisis happens. First thing you experience is fear, then it's confusion, and then you have to sort through narratives and all that. But I think that the lesson you can take from any of it, especially the way that I think that China is basically trying to directly parent its population. That's kind of always how China has worked. It's like if they're the control group, we're the experiment group. Hey, well, let's just throw things over there and see what happens, I think people, and there are more and more people expressing the sentiment, this is not a novel sentiment, people are really needing to take responsibility for their own lives and look to the people that they care about and all that. I say and all that. Look to the people that they care about and just look after them. Look after yourself, look after your family. Like, figure out whether something is serving you or not. Figure out how to develop better, healthier habits. And don't abandon the clearly sinking ship. Don't completely abandon. I mean, you may need to get away from it, but come back and talk to a few people. I think it's just a matter of making sure the information gets shared, because there are algorithms, there are elites with their own agendas, there are state actors, there are all these different forces going on in the world. And those are the ones that are physical, the ones we can debate about. Are these entities in it, then you can have there's a spiritual argument to be had. But I think that regardless, it really is a prompt for people to look inward and to see, hey, does this serve me? How can you better educate? I'm going to go look at the episode that Jordan mentioned where she was talking to, you say you're talking to someone about, I don't want to repeat, I don't want to misrepeat.
It was, so I was just talking to myself, man. It was a solo episode. It was me and some articles, but it was pretty interesting.
On the internet and not realizing the things that can come from that, it's.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a website apparently that you can put your child's face in to find where your child's face is being used without you knowing, which is it's very interesting if you're trying to maybe retroactively, heal some damage that you've done. But yeah, no, AI porn is 100% a thing. It's not just for young children, but even your teenager, who's 14 or 15 years old, taking their fully clothed face and then making it into a nude. It's life ruining.
And we knew that the new guard of family vlogging and all that was going to be the new Olsen twin or Disney Channel phenomenon. I mean, see what's happened with the what is it, 8 Passengers family with Ruby Frank and all that.
Oh yeah, it's not. That's the thing. It's not just, dude. It's not just disasters like that. That's the thing. That's just an obvious one that's wrong. People don't think about the oh gosh, the Christian influencer couples that use their kids, and they're monetizing off of them. It's disgusting. I hate it. It's disgusting. I'm sorry. Can't handle it.
People don't realize. I think a huge thing is people don't realize that, and obviously, even now we don't know the full implications. I've been thinking recently about, I mean, we're Gen Z. I know Jordan and I were Gen Z. You're millennial, Connor.
Millennial.
Regardless, we have the past 10 plus years of our life, a lot of our conversations, interactions, and such documented all across the internet. If someone wanted to make a digital version of us, they could probably do a pretty effective job given the information that we've freely given to the internet. We haven't seen a supreme manifestation of what that may look like in the future. And I've been thinking about that, and I'm not excited to see the negative. I focus on what's the next best thing I can do right now and such. Again, I don't want to be an alarmist about any of these things. There's terrible stuff going on in the world, and technology just keeps going and all that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that, sir.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a whole can of worms that maybe we can get into our next episode. I feel like I'm always the one cutting us off because if we go any longer, people will tune out, which is understandable because we're no Jordan Petersons. So again, we appreciate having you on. I think you left us with a good end point there about self-regulation, which could launch us into another episode at some point. So please come back on. Please join us again. We really appreciate having you. And if you are watching this episode on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, make sure that you do that. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you follow us on Spotify. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on all the things. You'll make us feel better. Okay, that's it. Connor, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't. Just that we need to get you a clip of you saying that so you don't have to say it every time.
I know. I really do need a clip. I do, but then I feel bad asking our editor to put it in. I'm sure it wouldn't be that hard, but
It's not hard. It's super easy. Barely
I feel like
inconvenience.
I've already messed with his life enough by botching like 2 episodes. No, it's 3 episodes I've botched. So I feel bad asking.
Oh, it'll be good. Then he just slices that in right at the end, and then he's done.
How about this? How about you do it? Like we should just interchange them so that it's not always me doing it.
Okay, we can both do one. Heck, we should just get everybody on the team to do one.
That would be a good idea.
And
That would be a good idea.
He can just pick them at his leisure.
That fantastic plan. Wow, we just had a team meeting on air.
There we go.
Okay. All right. Well, that is it, and we will see you next time for another episode. Who knows what it's going to be about, because I don't have our content calendar up. Talk to you guys later.